Hello everybody, this is ManOS and welcome to another Eternal Top Decks video series here on EternalTitans.com. Today I want to finally talk about Praxis Tokens. I've been avoiding this for quite some time because I had some reservations about the latest approach to tokens and have been messing around with some different approaches myself and haven't paid too much attention to the deck, but recently I picked it up a bunch, played a bunch with the currently established approach and a version of that I tuned myself, but embracing the philosophy of rally and going more aggressive and all in on the go wide theme basically with Disciple over Titan and stuff like that. And I was quite impressed with how well the deck did and how strong it felt, so figured it's time to give you guys the latest scoop on Praxis Tokens. It's been a while since I made a Praxis Tokens video, so let's dive right in. Alright, so this is the deck list. Nothing too unusual here, but just like a streamlined, consistent take on what you might see elsewhere. Other lists I saw were just unnecessarily greedy, if you ask me. They skimmed too much on power and just didn't streamline enough for the approach, and played a couple cards that I wasn't too happy with. So let's talk about the cards that I'm not playing that I see elsewhere. First of all, there's Trailmaker. Not very happy with the card in this deck. It helps with your Heart of the Vault a bit, but the problem is it's power and it's a unit, and it's a very fragile unit. You want to be able to just turn your board sideways, and then your opponent is always going to block your good units, so they're always going to block your Trailmaker over your random tokens, which means if you want to use it as a unit, you can't use it as power because it's going to die. And if you're not attacking with it, it's a bad power stone in a way, because it's a power stone that they can much easier kill with Torch and stuff like that in Varus favor. So the fact that it's a unit and a power in the deck doesn't really come up a whole lot, except against control sometimes. And even there it's kind of bad, because your power dying to their hailstorms and harsh rules makes your problems even bigger. Especially if you run less power because you have Trailmaker. So I don't think the card is very good in the deck, and that's why I'm not playing it. Next we have Amber Acolyte. The card is decent, but it's not great. It's just a very expensive, very weak unit. Spending 3 power on a 2/1 is just such a weak play, and kind of sets you back on tempo and board. And you need enough power to play it. I would recommend at least 28-ish actual power to play it, because your Initiative Descent is going to be silenced or dead a lot of the time. And then if you're stuck on 2 power with an Acolyte in hand instead of a 3rd power, you're just going to lose the game for no reason. Another reason why I'm not playing it. I don't know if here I could maybe, also you already have 8 3-cost cards, so you don't want too many of those. I could see maybe I don't know, if you really would want some Acolytes, could see shaving a power here and a rally or an Obliterate to fit to Amber Acolytes, but what does that really get us other than a weak 3-drop, like I said, so not a big fan here. What the other thing that some people are playing since the nerfs are Cinder Yetis. Not very impressed by it. Once again, another 3-drop. Also a pretty weak body. The warp can be nice value, and since the deck's very aggressive, shutting down a blocker for a turn seems nice. The problem is, if you do it early on, you're kind of not setting them back, it's not generating any tempo, so it's not that impressive of a play. Praxis Displacer was great because it actually set them back on tempo, while Cinder Yeti just presses a bit of damage and is not a very impressive unit. So I'd rather just play a bit more, play the full amount of rallies and more Obliterates. Other lists either have 3 rally, 1 to 2 Obliterates, or 4 rally and 1 Obliterate, for example, and then have 2 Cinder Yetis or something. So yeah, that's why there's no Cinder Yeti, and Humbug Swarm and Praxis Displacer are unplayable at this point in my opinion. I could be wrong on the Displacer, but I doubt it. 5 cost for the same body basically. Sure, it got +1 health, but that doesn't matter too much. can sometimes matter a bit with Obelisk now surviving some 3 attack things than Torch, but Torch has like plenty of things to do anyway, so that's not really an argument. So yeah, not impressed by Displacer. Like, I would have basically to cut the Obliterates for Displacers, and I don't think that's good. Like, Obliterate at least gets rid of a big blocker or wins the game when our board is already gone by a sweeper, or like we are not able to make any good attacks anymore, even with a Displacer. So that's why there's no Displacer, and yeah, Hamburg Swarm is just really bad now. Okay, so let's talk about the cards that I'm playing. Most of the cards are just like very stock and auto inclusions: 4 Grenadin Drone, 4 Initiate of the Sands, 4 Teacher, 4 Temple Scribe, 4 Aurelian Merchant, 4 Marisen's Disciple, 4 Heart of the Vault. They are all basically auto inclusions in this approach to the deck. I was very skeptical about the Disciple over Titan type thing, because Titan usually has been way better when I tried it in these types of decks, especially in like Shimmer Pack, for example. But the main difference here is this deck is different from Shimmer Pack and the other kinds of token decks that I played in the past, because this is basically an aggressive deck. This is basically sort of an aggro deck that just kind of like goes up the curve, unlike the other token decks and Shimmer Pack that I played that are much more mid-range decks that can play much more defense, offense kind of game, while this deck mostly just knows offense. Just turn your board sideways and rally them down, and does that very well and surprisingly consistently, which is why I came around on the whole rally go wide approach, and Disciple is an integral part of that over Titan. Also the fact that it denies your opponent early uses and tempo for their vanquishes, unless you play, say, an Obelisk with a Teacher out. Because unless you have a Teacher, you can even play Obelisk and just use Disciple to make a Scorpion or a Flyer, and then you still have 0 vanquish targets, which is really, really good. So keeping your units at a size that scales well against the opponent's answers is great, because against, say, Hellstorm, you can make a 3-3 with an Obelisk, then it's a 4-4, and then your Teacher also is a 4-4, and your Merchant is a 2-5, so you have like 12 potential bodies that survive a Hailstorm, so you can make it so that your opponent can interact as poorly as possible with your board. Heart of the Vault, just providing additional burn, also important to break face Aegis for your Obliterates and Torches a bunch of the time against control, otherwise Obliterate would be much less playable in the deck. And yeah, Heart of the Vault, just good value, in a decent way to rebuild the board after a sweeper. Heart of the Vault them, maybe drop something cheap that you drew with Heart of the Vault, and then you suddenly have like 2 or 3 bodies in play again, which is nice. And then also 3 Obelisk, not much explanation needed here. Forces in the market, because that's one of the things that made this deck as good as it is now, that you virtually have 7 Obelisks instead of 4, because that was one of the main issues of the list before, that it was too inconsistent at buffing its board. And now it does that very consistently between Obelisk, Merchant and Rally, which is also why I think Aurelian Merchant is super essential, and there's no debate about whether you should be playing Aurelian Merchant or X-Tune Merchant, if you ask me. Also because Aurelian Merchant gives you access to Sandstorm Scarf to not lose to some of the flying heavy decks in the game. Vault of the Praxis is the single best tool in time against control. That's like the one thing where the X-Tune Merchant has a slight leg up. It has access to, say, Flamestoker, which is the single best card probably for this type of deck against control, but it costs you so much because having 4 instead of 7 Obelisks is just such a big deal, and the fact that Merchant is a great blocker early on when you need it against more aggressive decks, and also against opposing Teachers, and surviving stuff like Hailstorm is very critical. Sure, X-Tune Merchant can trade with the opposing Teacher if they have no way of like interfering with that. So I guess both merchants are kind of even against Teacher there, so that's not the biggest argument. And then we have a Shatterglass Mage, just as a way to mainly break Obelisk in the mirror, because that's just like the very important thing in the mirror. Obviously, the one who has more obelisks is likely to win, but not necessarily. Like sometimes if you're ahead otherwise, you can just swing into the board and rally and make the obelisk not matter and stuff like that. And also like Shatterglass Mage here over other things, because it's also just a unit, it's a threat against like controlling decks where you can sometimes kill some of their relics like Visage or Temporal Distortion or whatever, while also deploying a threat, which is a nice 2-for-1. And the alternative basically would be Disjunction, to have the surprise blowouts mid-combat sometimes and get back your obelisk if it got killed. But I like the Shatterglass Mage a bit more, but I can see going either way. But yeah, the deck kind of just cares about the value that Shatterglass Mage provides. Like also in the mirror, having a 5/3 Overwhelm that might get buffed by your stuff is also really nice, compared to just like the cheap efficient card in a Disjunction. And it also curves really well. You can curve Merchant into Shatterglass Mage next turn. And then we have a Carnosaur, which is also a great tool that Aurelian Merchant provides, because it just gives us a great 2-for-1 play that kills their biggest blocker and provides us with a big body, and also synergizes well with Obelisk in killing opposing 6 or 7 health units, like Tavrot if that shows up again and stuff like that. So that's nice too. The Xenan Merchant would have Obliterate there, which is still fine. But yeah, I think the main argument for Aurelian Merchant is really the 4 health, the +1 power, and the fact that it gives you virtually more obelisks and the Sandstorm Scarf. Because with Xenan Merchant you basically would have a Rally and Obliterate, a Flamestoker in the market, a Boar, and one other card, and like probably a Cloud of Ash. The problem there is that yeah, you are super weak to flyers in that list, and you are worse at hitting your 6 power for your Heart of the Vault and your 8 power for your Obelisk, and having Obelisk all the time. So yeah, that's why I am pretty confident that Aurelian Merchant is a much better choice in the end. And most people play Aurelian Merchant these days, so most people seem to agree. Then we have 4 Torch, also no explanation needed, especially in a proactive fire-based deck. Just great burn spell, great removal, very efficient. Assembly Line, one of the main draws of being Praxis for this type of strategy, because this and Grenadin Drone provides us with enough great token producers, multiple units from one card, exactly what this type of deck needs. Then we have 4 Rally, a sort of finishing blow, even against control with their sweepers. If you can get in one attack with a couple of units with a Rally, dealing them a bunch of damage is usually enough to finish them off with a couple of attacks post sweeper and or just burn spells. So make sure that you rally against control before they can clear your board for the first time. The Force Rally is debatable. Like if there was something that I would want to fit in the deck, I could see shaving a Rally potentially, since the card is pretty high variance. Like when you're ahead and have a board, the card is amazing. When you're behind or when you have a small board, the card is really bad. But you also have Merchant to get rid of it when it's not very good, and there are also games that you just sometimes win by like double rallying with a medium sized board on like 6 power and stuff like that. So currently I've been reasonably happy with the 4 rallies, but I can see a 3. Kind of similar with Obliterate. Card is a bit clunky, but it's a decent removal that kills some bigger units cheaper than the units themselves, which is nice. So killing like a 6-drop for 5 power is a decent deal. Having the way to ace space and then Obliterate to finish opponents off is also very important, because the deck is pretty all in on the aggressive plan, so grinding people out doesn't work very well in most cases. So Obliterate is kind of important to finish the game and be able to seal the deal when you get stopped. And 3 Obliterate was the amount that I could fit, and also drawing multiples or drawing them too early can be awkward, so 3 seems like a good number. And yeah, with Initiate and Merchant, the deck also gets to the amount of power fairly quickly, so you can often easily Obliterate a Titan on curve on turn 4 to keep just attacking, which sets the opponent back massively if they're playing that Titan in the hopes to start blocking and reducing your board while you ace space into it, and then you just Obliterate it. They're just so far behind that they usually just lose to your Swarm without sweepers. And then we have 29 power. Most lists I've seen have 25 or 27, which I think is absurd. Like the 25 lists were usually like the, I don't know, 4 Trailmaker lists with 2 Acolytes or something, which I explained why I don't like that. And the 27 power lists were basically the like no Trailmaker, no Acolyte lists, effectively, just being greedy. And then they had like 2 Seek power or something, which is even worse, I think, because you have 8 1-drops in 2 different colors. So playing stuff like Seek makes both of them worse. And especially Initiate is super important to be on curve, also because turn 1 Initiate means you can turn 2 play a depleted Crest of Impulse and still play your Teacher of Humility, greatly increasing the chance to play your Teacher and stuff like that. And sure, if you have the Crest turn 1, you can play it turn 1, but if you draw it off the top as your second time source, you can't, and so on. So there's just like a bunch of upsides to this, and also having 29 power allows you to have enough time sources for your Initiate to be reasonably reliable turn 1, and at the same time have a decent amount of fire sources for your Grenadin drone to open your aggression early. And also have enough colored sources for your Heart of the Vault, which you otherwise might need something like Trailmaker for, which has the problems that I explained. I also like that when you play 29 power, you can easily play a couple of Temple Standards. Sure, it hurts the Initiate a bit, like if I could just play 2 more Time Sigils, I would be at 14 turn 1 sources if I have a ready seed. Now it's only 12, which is not ideal, but the Temple Standard adds a ton to the deck. I've really liked the card. It was amazing. If I could fit more time sources that without touching the 12 ready ones, I would consider a third, but I don't think you want to go lower on the fire amount. The fire amount that I have right now feels pretty good. Like, sometimes you can't play hard right away, which is a bit unfortunate, but you can usually play it reasonably well, which is fine. And you have the Waystones. I have a reasonable amount of fire for the Waystones, and mostly outside of those 2, the deck operates on like 1 fire and just wants the second fire for the Obliterate at some point. So I think skewing your deck too much towards fire is just not worth it, because it hurts your Initiate, it hurts your Teacher, it hurts your Temple Scribe, and those are just much more impactful than having your Heart of the Vault a little less quickly, basically, because this is your early game, this is the core of your deck, and there are also more cards. There are 12 cards versus like 4 cards. So 4 to 8 cards if you count the Waystone, but the Waystone is kind of just like free value. You don't have to like bend yourself over backwards to make your Waystone better. Which is, by the way, another nice thing of being Praxis, having the Waystone, having additional free bodies here. It also happens to synergize nicely with Merchant, just getting a free card to Merchant away, if you don't have spare power to Merchant away. But yeah, anyway, Temple Standard has been amazing. It makes up a bit for the loss of Praxis Displacer, giving you ways to impair the opponent's board, just bouncing like a big blocker to get more damage in, and also make sure less units are dying, so that you can just close out the game before the opponent stabilizes. I've also had plenty of games where I just drew it with Heart of the Vault, or had it in hand with power open with Heart of the Vault against control, just rebuying a Heart of the Vault if they kill it. Generating more value has been amazing. There's just a bunch of good things to rebuy. Same for like Marisen's Disciple or Grenadin Drone, especially against control, has been great. Temple Standard is very good in the deck. So yeah, if I could fit a third, I would be happy to, but right now I don't think we can lower the amount of fire, and we can't really lower the amount of ready time either. because the initiate is already like spread thin. And turn 1 initiate is really good. Yeah, and the market I already explained. So this is the deck list. 29 power is a pretty good amount, with like 6 drops in the deck, Obelisk in the deck, Merchant in the deck, 5 drops in the deck, and we really want our acceleration to accelerate us and not make up for missed power drops, so you should only count them so much. And obviously 29 power would not be enough without the accelerants to play 6 drops, so if there were like no accelerants in the deck I would probably play like 31. So we're still playing less power than we need for the curve due to the accelerants, but not too much, and not that much less power that it puts us in a spot where we just stumble and get crippled, especially when we have use for up to 8 power thanks to Obelisk and a Merchant to get rid of excess power, and our power generates value between Waystone, Standard and Crest. So there's just no point in being greedy. It's much more beneficial to be consistent and smooth and just yeah, make the deck spin round like a wheel. So yeah, couldn't even fault anyone for, say, shaving a rally and adding another Temple Standard to have more Temple tactics available and make the power even smoother. Because Temple Standard is just that good in that deck, because the bounce is really great proactively and reactively. And having a card that is power and a spell at the same time is great. Alright, that's it for the deck list. Praxis Tokens, the all-in aggressive approach that, in my experience, has been actually way more powerful of a deck than I thought. Deck is consistent, is fast, has a lot of power and value to it. It's very brutal, has decent ways of dealing with a lot of situations. And yeah, it's also there's also a lot more play to it, making you use your skill than a lot of people think. So yeah, it's just a great deck, a tier 1 deck for a reason, even since it lost a couple of tools with the nerfs. And now that I played the deck a bunch, I really get why they nerfed Praxis Displacer. Getting to put 4 Praxis Displacer into this list would honestly just be disgusting. Like, I could already imagine like how brutal this deck would play with like 4 Praxis Displacers in this list. Since the deck, basically in my experience, feels really hard to beat for most decks unless they sweep the board at least once. So if your deck cannot sweep the board one time, most of the time you just can't beat this deck. Like, one of the few ways to try and beat this deck is having a good blocker curve and then topping it off with a way to make sure you don't get finished off, which is mainly Sword of Unity. So unless you can sweep the board at least once or can play a timely Sword of Unity, in my experience this deck is just gonna stomp you. And that's a lot more and a lot better than a lot of people give the deck credit for. And yeah, regarding the size of the deck tech series, I decided for now to record 4 instead of 6 games. Kind of a middle ground. We had around 50% of people wanting 5 games and the rest 3 or 4, and 5 is not a significant reduction. Also, there were usually at least 2-ish videos that had significantly less views than the rest, so seemed like the majority people is willing to only watch 3 to 4 games anyway. So in order to make this more time efficient and try and make more deck techs, I'll stick with 4 now. Let me know if there's still enough people that think 3 would be fine and going down to 3 is maybe a better idea. I'm happy to reconsider it, but 5 or 6 is done for now. Alright, that's it for the deck tech. As usual, gonna hop into some games, show it to you in action, and before we do this, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel down here. You have the watermark here in the corner, and obviously the subscription button down below. Turn on notifications to not miss out on future content, and of course like the video if you enjoy it, and leave some comments to let me know what you think. And I'm always open to constructive feedback and suggestions on how to improve the content and the channel in the future. And yeah, any like and comment helps the video get more exposure. And of course, follow me on social media. Follow my stream to catch me live. I stream quite a lot lately. And of course, check out eternaltitans.com for more content from my teammates if you're not already watching through there. So, see you in a moment with game number 1.